The game is over. The emotions are raw. But the takes are ready. It's time for Postgame Live with Jared Stillman.
Okay, Postgame Live here on the 440 Sports Network, presented by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, here on our wonderful, beautiful, very happy program today, live from the Great White North, up here in Toronto, Canada, where I went to the World Series last night. And so the Titans got absolutely and completely, utterly shithoused by the Indianapolis Colts again, and I feel kind of bad, because I am doing today's show from my brother-in-law's house and inside his office, and his kids are going to hear me just yelling and screaming about how terrible this Titans team is. But that's a reality, and it's an unfortunate reality, and it's a depressing reality, but I think it is the reality that we are all living. And I had to jerry-rig VPNs and all kinds of backdoor ways in order to be able to watch the game. And Kelsey says, am I wearing a Star Trek outfit? No, I'm wearing just a, little Costco sweatshirt. Don't hate. But I guess, I'm kind of learning the ins and outs of podcasting and what's new and, what would make me different and what works for other people and what's successful and, that kind of stuff. And we're doing a good job, for what is a show that's a couple months old. I'd like to think we're doing pretty well. But that's not really what it's. I think what I've learned about whether it's radio, podcasting, whatever, I'm just going to do things the way I want to do them, the way that I feel is best to artistically explain how I feel. And I used to tell Caroline when she was getting started in radio, I was like, Caroline, you're not preaching to the masses when you host a show. You're having a conversation with somebody who's in their car, who's getting off of work, who's had a long day of stupid, bureaucratic, or, corporate horseshit, and they just want to be entertained. They want to gossip. They want to talk shit. They just want to have a good time on their 40-minute ride home before they have to get home and get ragged on by their kids or their parents or their families or whatever. They want to hear things about the team that other people won't say, but things that you would just be talking shit at a sports bar and you would have. And you're not Moses out there atop Mount Sinai preaching to everybody else, which leads me into the Titans and the Colts. Today, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to pretend like this microphone, and I can see exactly how many people are watching at any given time, but I'm not going to care about that. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to tell you all just how I feel about this team, how watching this lifeless, listless, going nowhere organization, how it makes me feel. And before I get accused like I did all offseason when I kept telling people that the Titans were so bad this offseason and that Callahan's Pee Wee program was bullshit and that the situation they were going to put Cam Ward into was going to fail him. And that, again, I didn't even think Cam was that good to begin with. And I still don't think Cam's that good. But all offseason, I had people that were like, you're just negative for clicks. You just try to make everything a story. You just want to be a hater. Why can't you just let us live in La La Land and pretend that we have a good team? And I'm just not interested in that. I mean, I'm interested in being truthful. I'm interested in telling you what I think. I told you guys when the Titans went into the playoffs as the 1 seed in 2021, I said, I think this team might go to the Super Bowl. I think this team might win the Super Bowl. And I really felt that way. And I wanted that to happen. I want this team to be good. I want these Sundays to matter. I want to know that everybody's going to be so jazzed up about the Titans that I can sit here and I could, that I have to tell Lindsay, like, hey, if we're going to go to Canada to go to the World Series, to go watch the Blue Jays, that we're going to have to do something better. No disrespect. I am incredibly grateful that that her brother's, letting me use his office. But like, I need to make sure that we get like the full production going for the show because there's going to be so many people watching because the Titans are good. And it's the opposite of that. And so I'm going to tell you how I feel about this team. And you can agree, you can disagree. And again, that's your call. But the way I feel about this team and what we have to watch is a team that is in need of a full-blown rebuild, a team that needs a competent coaching staff. They do not need an elite coaching staff. I know everybody wants the elite coaching staff. Everybody wants to believe that, oh my God, Jared, if we were to get the next Sean McVay, it would be, I'm not asking for that. I would like the next Mike Mularkey. Just a competent coaching staff. Old guys that actually know football. Because this coaching staff that Brian Callahan put together is top to bottom a bunch of freaking dopes. So I want a competent coaching staff, and I want a football team that at least gives hints that they are getting better, that they are on the right track, or that they have some sort of an idea about how to get better. That's all I ask. Like, that is all I ask, is give me a football team that has an idea of where they're headed. And yesterday, when we were going to the Blue Jays game, Lindsay's brother asked me, why do the Titans suck so bad? Because people around here in Canada, they don't care very much about football. Although they do have, it's amazing how many channels Lindsay's parents have that have the games, but they do not care about football. So it's kind of like, oh yeah, football, Titans, they suck. What's the deal? And he asked me, and he's a very successful businessman. He's a senior vice president of this huge Canadian hotel chain. And he asked me, why this team sucks so bad. And I was like, well, the owners offer rocker, and she hires morons. And these guys actually give pretty good interviews the first time that they get hired. They give good press conferences. And then I start to see them operating. And I'm like, that's not how good general managers, that's not how real football teams are built. And because there's no winners and losers in the offseason, the team makes a decision that I don't think is a very good decision, or that doesn't feel like a very good football decision. And then everybody turns this into, but no, Jared, you don't understand. The reason that they're doing this is because they want to believe it. But then when push starts to come to shove and we see football being played, nothing's getting better. And so the owner doesn't know what she's looking for. And these people talk big, but they don't really know what they're doing. And I was actually asking him, like, have you ever hired somebody? And again, this is a huge Canadian hotel company that he kind of runs. And I was like, have you ever hired somebody that you interview him and you're like, man, this guy, like, he's pretty smart. These people, they understand, like, they get it, they would be great additions to our team. And then all of a sudden you see them operating and you're like, these guys are fucking idiots. And he's like, yeah, that happens. He said, in fact, they've changed their interview process for how they interview people, because it happened where they've interviewed people they thought that knew what they were doing that didn't. And that's the problem with the Titans. The Titans don't have a single person over there that knows what they're doing. Not one. And again, we can talk about the specifics of today's game, but something that I don't understand is how every single one of these games is the exact same game. I do not understand it. And I made this pick in 6-pack picks. I don't remember the exact score that I picked on Friday, but I picked this exact game in which I said it'll be close, ish at halftime, and Indy will come out and blow the crap out of them, and it'll be something like 34-13. And the final score obviously is 38-14. And that's exactly what happened. And that's what's happened every single game this season. How is it that every single game is the same? Like, it doesn't matter if Jeffrey Simmons plays. Even though Jeffrey Simmons is a great player, or at least this season, Jeffrey Simmons has been a great player. It does not matter if he plays. Every game's close at halftime, blown out in the second half. How does that happen? It's like, again, if you were to play a good team one week, like let's use the Colts. If you were to play a good team, and it looks like Indy's a good team, if you were to play the Colts and you were to be close at halftime and get blown out in the second half, and then the next week play a bad team, then you would say, okay, well, the good team blew them out in the second half, but the bad team that they'll play, they're not going to blow them out in the second half. The bad team, instead of losing by 4 touchdowns, they'll lose by 2 touchdowns because the other team's not as good as the Colts, and then they play the Raiders, and it's the exact same. And I've never seen that happen before. Like, I have lived through some really, really bad Titans teams, as have all of us. I lived through 2014 and I lived through 2015, and those were some terrible Titan teams. And I have been very hesitant to say that this is the worst Titans team ever because those teams were so bad. And yet, I don't think they were as predictably bad as this team. Like, they lost some close-ish games. This team hasn't lost a close game this year, have they? Has this team lost a game that was being determined in the fourth quarter? And what's crazy is, again, they were down 10 points at halftime, which it should have been 7, but they can't kick field goals, and they won't get rid of the guy who can't kick field goals. So they were down 10. And again, that is not an insurmountable deficit in the NFL. So they're down by 10 points, and immediately the game's over as soon as they kick off to start the second half, which is the same every week. Just like last week against the Patriots. They were down by 4, kick off the second half, boom, game's over. And I don't understand how that's possible. How every game is the same. I don't get it. I've never seen that before. I've never seen that before in the NFL, ever. So somebody smarter than me is going to have to explain that one to me. I don't get it. The second thing when it comes to the Titans is I'm trying to figure out who over there knows what they're doing. I don't think the coaches have any clue what they're doing. And that's from Mike McCoy on down. I know Callahan had no idea what he was doing. Like, I remember last year at training camp, and I'm talking about 2024, at training camp with Callahan, and there were some questionable things, like all the excuse making he was doing, or the fact that, Will Levis throws an interception against the Seahawks in the 2-minute drill, and Callahan says, "Good job, everybody. Good practice. Now you guys get off and go hit the showers." And I'm like, what? What? No, get back out there and do it. But hey, Callahan's got a way of doing things. Jeffrey Simmons throws a punch at practice, and Callahan doesn't throw him out because Callahan doesn't believe in that, but he's got to. So we'll see. We'll see if his way worked. It didn't. His way sucked. So I know Callahan didn't know what he was doing. And then when Callahan didn't change the coaching staff, it was clear to me that he didn't know what he was doing. And so he comes out with the Pee Wee program this offseason, and I know he doesn't have any clue what he's doing. So I know Callahan didn't know what he was doing. Mike McCoy comes in as interim coach, and I'm like, you know what? At least Mike McCoy will have an idea of what he's doing. And then I watch the Colts, and I watch the game plan where Jonathan Taylor just annihilates them. And I think, does this team have a defensive coaching staff? Like, do they practice during the week? And do they go over scout team and say, hey, this is Jonathan Taylor. He might be the best offensive player in the NFL. Whatever you do, don't let him run for 150 yards and score 3 touchdowns. If they decide to throw the ball and Alec Pierce and Tyler Warren go out there and light our asses up, well, they're better than us, so it is what it is. But whatever you do, don't let this guy just go run right up the middle and go score touchdowns every time. And the Titans are like, nope. And here goes Taylor right up the middle, touchdown. Mike McCoy at the end of the half last week was like, we got to be super conservative, man. We can't do this. The wind is blowing too hard. We can't do it. Then at the end of the half this week, he's like, let's go for it. What? Again, where's the consistency in thinking? So he doesn't know what he's doing. Denard Wilson doesn't know what he's doing. They don't know what they're doing. The coaching staff doesn't know what they're doing. And that's bad enough. But they're all going to be gone at the end of the year anyways. But the people above the coach, somebody needs to explain to me that any of the people above the coach know what they're doing. So I'll use number 18, Jalen Armour Davis. I'll use him as an example because he fucking stinks. And one of the reasons that they explained that they were getting rid of Jarvis Brownlee Jr. was because they felt like 18, Jalen Armour Davis, could play football and, hey, we don't need this Jarvis Brownlee here. We got 18. This guy fucking stinks. And every week it is the same shit. I mean, there was one ball that Pittman popped in the air and caught himself with 18 all on. Pittman made an incredible catch, for the touchdown, one-handed, where 18's interfering with him the whole time. Charles Davis made every excuse in the book. Lord, I love Charles Davis because he's a really nice guy. I hope he never calls another Titans game. Because this guy, there is nobody better to put lipstick on a pig than Charles Davis. But again, he's awful. This number 18, he is awful. And you got rid of Jarvis Brownlee for a bag of footballs for him? Well, Jarvis Brownlee wasn't really a good culture fit. He didn't really buy in. He had discipline issues, and he was unprofessional, and he was... L'Jarius Sneed was allegedly shooting up car dealerships during the season last year. I don't know who we can sit there and play this game with of like, well, he's a bad guy, even though he's not the one shooting up car dealerships, but the guy who's shooting up car dealerships is not a bad guy. So I don't think so if Mike Borgonzi made that move again, because the Titans have this convoluted front office with Brinker and Borgonzi, and I don't know who made it, but whoever made that move for Jalen Armour Davis to play over Jarvis Brownlee doesn't know football, and they should be fired too. Because to me, that's so incompetent. And it's everything. It's the Cam Ward thing. I mean, Cam Ward stinks. I actually thought today was one of Cam's better games, but I think that's probably in comparison to the fact that Cam has sucked so bad this year. Somebody today, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't really watch the noon slate of games because we got home last night after the World Series, and I tried to watch them on the couch, but I fell asleep, and I knew I needed to watch Titans game. I was going to do the show. So I fell asleep and didn't watch them that closely. And somebody tweeted me today and was like, what do you think about Jackson Dart now? And I just looked at the stat line, and I saw that Jackson Dart had a quarterback rating of 98. And I'm like, Cam has not, I guess he sucked. I don't know. Cam has not had a quarterback rating that high this year. And that's a terrible organization, terrible general manager, bad head coach, bad owner, as bad, if not worse than you last year. And Jackson Dart's better. How does that happen? And you turned down all those picks because you thought Cam was the next Joe Burrow. And so I'm not convinced that anybody associated with the Titans has any idea what they're doing. They're not getting any better. Like they're not 1 ounce better than they were last year with Ran Carthon, who was a moron as the general manager. So these people that ousted Ran, like Chad Brinker, somehow, again, I was told Chad Brinker didn't snake Ran. I'm not totally sure I believe that, but whatever. But Chad Brinker, he might know less than Ran, and that's saying something because Ran was terrible. So I don't know what's going on here. all I can tell you that as a fan, this is incredibly painful and incredibly hard to watch and incredibly hard to talk about every day. Like, it is breaking me down. This time last year, I was talking to people, like I was talking to Ian last year and saying, am I becoming unhappier as a person because the Titans and Preds are so bad? Like, I love talking about Vanderbilt football right now. They're great. But, I mean, this is just, I don't get it. I don't get how they're just not 1 ounce better. I wrote down some notes today that I do want to get into. I'll start on Cam, where I actually thought Cam was better than he's been for most of this season. But I think that really is more of a statement about just how shitty Cam has been this year than it is like a representation of, the idea that Cam played well today, because I don't think Cam played well today, and I don't think Cam's very good. And I don't think Cam has a lot of help out there, and I don't think Cam's very well coached, but I still don't think Cam's very good. And I thought Cam probably played his best game so far this season. 259 throwing the ball, 76.5 quarterback rating, not terrible. He threw the 1 interception in the end zone, but I kind of, that was a 4th down, got to have it kind of play. And I appreciate Cam not saying, hey, I'm not going to throw that because I don't want to get that interception. So, I don't know. Again, thought it was Cam's probably best game. Still a bad game, but I thought it was probably his best game. But here's something Cam's going to have to learn if this is going to work. And I don't think this is going to work. And I am on the record having said before they drafted him, don't do it. And I am on the record as having said like 4 games into his tenure, he's going to be a bust. And I stand by that. And I think it will be equal parts of him not being that good, but also them busting him. When I see him play, I get Marcus Mariota vibes from Cam Ward. And I don't think, and what I mean by that, they're very different people and they have very different demeanors. But I'm telling you, I feel like in the end, they're going to represent roughly the same, which is some talent, but very limited. And that will limit your ability with that guy as quarterback. Like with Mariota was a very good college player, which he was much better than Cam. And Mariota was bigger, faster, and more accurate, throwing over the middle than Cam. Cam has a better arm. Cam can really freaking sock it in there at about 80 miles an hour. He's got a fastball. Marcus didn't have that. Now, Cam can't throw the deep ball for shit because he's not accurate, but he does have a better arm. Cam is kind of more of a playmaker than Mariota was. And Cam has a much more active demeanor and attitude than Mariota did. But I still think their ceilings are kind of the same, which is they're never going to be elite quarterbacks. And you can keep trying it because you drafted him high, but he's never going to be an elite quarterback. The second thing with Cam is he has got to stop calling people out and showing people up. And I understand there are Titan fans that are frustrated with the coach and Titans fans that are frustrated with the team. I thought that was the ultimate bitch move from Mike McCoy today to not go for it on, what was it, like 4th and 3 from the 40-yard line, and they sent out Johnny Hekker to punt. And I'm not saying that it's Mike McCoy's fault that Johnny Hekker punted the ball into the end zone, or that it's Mike McCoy's fault that Jonathan Taylor took the ball on the next play and ran it all the way down the sideline for a touchdown. That's not Mike McCoy's fault. It's not like Mike McCoy thought, hey, we're going to send Johnny Hekker out there to punt, and he's going to go punt the ball into the end zone. And it's not as if he sat there and said, okay, we're going to get on defense and let Jonathan Taylor run down the sideline for a touchdown. I mean, I don't think this is Chauncey Billups coaching the Titans. So I see him go out there to punt the ball, and I'm like, why? Why? You're down by 10 in the second half. You fucking stink. Your kicker can't kick. So go for it. We want to see the offense with the ball. And the more reps for Cam and more reps for the offensive line. And hey, screw it. Let's go. And I thought that was the biggest bitch move. That being said, I thought the way Cam handled it was rather disrespectful for a quarterback who sucks. And let me explain that. Because Tom Brady has gone off on his coaches on the sidelines. We've seen it in the past. He and Bill O'Brien got into it one time in a game at Washington, and he went after Josh McDaniels years ago in a game against Buffalo, where McDaniels got on him and Brady just went berserk. And so people will say, Tom Brady gets on his coaches, so you don't get on Tom Brady, but you'll get on Cam Ward. Let me ask you a question. And if it's out there, I would be shocked. You think Tom Brady was ripping Charlie Weiss and Bill Belichick before Tom Brady became Tom Brady? You think Peyton Manning was lighting into Jeff Saturday before he was the great Peyton Manning? I'm going to guess probably not. Because there's a certain status that you have to achieve, in my opinion, of being a quarterback to where you can hold guys accountable and you can show them up a little bit. And it's, hey, he's fiery. He wants to win. You need to get on his level. Cam Ward ain't that. At least not yet. And on two separate occasions, Cam Ward, I think, showed his teammates or his coaches up. The first is obviously the one I referenced there with the Mike McCoy thing, where he was obviously, I felt the same way he felt, but I'm not the quarterback, and the quarterback needs to go to the sideline, and if you got something to say it, but you do that in private. You don't, that's the same as him getting up there at the podium and being like, coach has no balls. Like, it would make for a great soundbite, but you can't do that. The other was on the throw where he overshot Io Manor, and right after it was over, you could tell he was pissed. And he was, mad that Io Manor kind of slowed up as he was waiting to get and I understand. And it makes Cam look bad. Like, it makes Cam look bad if you're Cam Ward. It makes Cam look bad that he threw the ball down the field. Io Manor was open. It looks like if Cam throws a good ball, Io Manor catches it, runs into the end zone for a touchdown, and instead he overshot him. And I even said on Twitter, I'm like, Cam can't make that. You got to make that throw. And then you see Io Manor slowed up for a second, then started running again. And it's like, oh, shit. Oh, if he had thrown that, he would have. And I get it. But like every pitcher in baseball will tell you, you don't show up your fielder when they make an error. And so, in my opinion, Cam showed up Io Manor, and Cam showed up Mike McCoy today, and he's got to stop doing that. Because we saw that with the we ass comments, in which everybody's like, Cam was just telling the truth. He was. But his teammates don't want to hear that. And Cam's not playing at a Tom Brady level where you got to respect it. So that's one thing that Cam's got to get figured out, is you got to carry the team in order to be able to talk like that. And I understand being in that position. Like, I know that it's not the same, but I understand being in that position where you're doing your part. Everybody else is letting you down. Your organization is letting you down. Your teammates are letting you down. And you have to understand, like, there's a time and a place to be like, hey, I'm the quarterback. I'm the guy in charge here. I'm the guy who's getting results here. I'm the guy who's, and there's a time where you just have to suck it up and take it. And right now, Cam needs to suck it up and take it. If Cam had a couple of league MVPs under his belt, then he could act that way. But he doesn't. So he's got to cut out with the antics. I put this on the list. This is not a big nugget, but I think this kind of goes back to why this team sucks as bad as they do. Lloyd Cushenberry is a problem. And here's what I think I realized with how the Titans have gotten to be so bad. And look, J-Rob missed in the draft. The A.J. Brown trade was catastrophic. Now, I'm not as convinced as everybody else is that if they hadn't made that trade, they would have won the Super Bowl, because I think what really hurt that 2022 team was not A.J. Brown being traded. And again, we can debate 2022 all you want, but Danico Autry got hurt when they beat Green Bay, and I don't think he returned until the season finale against Jacksonville. And Danico Autry was a really important part of that defense. And so I thought that part really hurt them when they lost Danico Autry for most of the season, and they were 7-3, and then all of a sudden they ended up 7-10. But the A.J. Brown trade was a disaster. Some of these draft picks, just freaking terrible. Vrabel's coaching staff, not great, but that's not really why you're so bad today. You know, the 2022 draft was Robinson's last draft. And players that were drafted in 2020 and 2021 have now been eligible for contracts. So if you had drafted a good player in 2020, you would have had to give them a contract extension by now. And so you have players on your team that you signed from the 2020 draft class that aren't your players, but it makes up for you missing on those draft picks because you've signed them to free agent deals. L'Jarius Sneed is an example of that. Lloyd Cushenberry is an example of that. You know, players that were signed, you know, or were drafted in those draft classes that if you had drafted them, you would have wanted to sign a second contract. The problem with the team is that they never have really fully embraced a total rebuild. And I don't think they've really totally understood what it actually looks like when it comes to rebuilding. And I know that sounds complicated, but when you draft a guard with the 11th overall pick, you're not rebuilding. But then your second pick ends up being a quarterback. So that hurts. But they've also whiffed in free agency. And I think the owner is so stupid that because they whiffed so bad in free agency, that now she thinks free agency is bad. And I understand that. I understand the idea of somebody saying, hey, here's our plan. Free agency is our plan. It not working, and then you assuming free agency is bad. The problem with free agency is that the Titans completely whiffed in free agency. L'Jarius Sneed was an injury risk when they traded for him. They completely ignored it, and it has totally fucked them. The one that is really bothering me is Lloyd Cushenberry. This guy is awful. Like, have you people watched Lloyd Cushenberry? Again, I don't think this is the end of the world because it's the starting center on a bad team. But they gave Lloyd Cushenberry $50 million guaranteed. There were two centers on the free agent market, and they needed a free agent center. And the two guys were Biotish from Dallas and Cushenberry. And Biotish was an undersized but solid center. And Cushenberry was a big but kind of had up and down performances in Denver. You know, wasn't consistent year to year. And they went with Cushenberry. And they went with Cushenberry because Bill Callahan told them to go with Cushenberry. And they went with J.C. Latham because Bill Callahan told them to draft J.C. Latham. And they probably signed Kevin Zeitler because Bill Callahan told them to do it. Bill Callahan's not general manager. And nobody would have ever wanted Bill Callahan to be general manager. Would you have wanted Bill Callahan to help in the process? Yes. But you don't want Bill Callahan to make the calls. And they're so stupid and they didn't have enough experience that they let Bill Callahan make the calls, and it stuck you with Lloyd Cushenberry, a center who is absolutely awful. And that's money you're not getting back. You're not going to replace him at center. He's going to be the starting center, but he's not good. And so I put on my notes random, but Lloyd Cushenberry is a problem. And that's a problem that goes back to free agency is not bad. You just had an incompetent general manager and an incompetent coach, and you were relying too much on the line coach, who was an NFL coach that got fired 20 years ago. And you were relying too much on him to tell you who to draft and sign. And that's why you missed on Cushenberry and you missed on Snead, and you're trying to fit those guys in there because they need to be replaced because you never should have signed them in the first place. I know that was really long-winded to talk about Lloyd Cushenberry like that, but free agency is not bad. Again, you're not going to build a Super Bowl champion simply off of free agency. You do have to hit on some draft picks. But it's not like the Philadelphia Eagles didn't sign Saquon Barkley or sign Zach Bond or trade for A.J. Brown. So free agency is not that bad. The choices you have made in free agency are just abysmal. So that's the other thing. And then there's one final thing that I'll get off my chest, and then we will get to your reaction from the YouTube chat here on Postgame Live. And I am going to do a read for Hiller because we may not be doing a Titans Monday show tomorrow, just because what's to be said that needs to be said. We'll be traveling back from Canada. Who knows what the times are, etc. Plus my entire household's sick. So we'll figure that out. But let me tell you about Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. I love them. They've been taking care of my home for years. They can do the exact same for you. Hiller has been in business since 1990. They are family owned and operated. That's one of my favorite parts of actually doing this show is I get to talk about Hiller, whom I love. 100% satisfaction of happy you'll be. The service is free. And if a customer is not pleased with the work performed, Hiller will make right. Learn more by visiting happyhiller.com, where they are professional, experienced, and trustworthy. And they send those professional, experienced, trustworthy technicians into your home, and they leave it clean and better than they found it. And I know this because I use Hiller at my home. Care is their core value, and they are proud supporters of the Predators. Vandy, how about Vandy, baby? And the Tennessee Volunteers. And let me say this, I'm in my brother-in-law and his wife's, I'm at their house right now doing the show. And I will tell you that if Hiller came all the way to Canada, I'd say you got to call Hiller. That's how good they are. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Call the Happy Face truck today. Okay, we will get into your reaction as far as everything is concerned. But there's something that I've got to talk about because I've seen this coming up, all the insiders. And I could rant about this for eons, but there was a huge scandal involving the Ravens, about how Lamar Jackson, they said did practice. And then they said, well, he practiced with the scout team, so he's not going to play. And it shifted the betting line. And it's a terrible time to have something like that happen where it shifts the betting line because the public's, trust in the integrity of sports is down a little bit right now and everything else. So that was bad. And so there's been a lot of talk about insiders and news reporting and everything else. And the way the insider game works, and I've told you about this, if somebody wants information out there, 95% of the time, it's because they want it out there. If something gets out there, it's because somebody wants it out there. So when you hear Cleveland is shopping Johnny Joe, it is because either Cleveland wants it out there or one of these teams that is negotiating a trade with Cleveland wanted to put it out there. So always keep that in mind. And the Titans have let it be known to multiple insiders, Adam Schefter at ESPN, Diana Rossini at The Athletic. They have let it be known that the Titans are shopping every player on their team except Cam Ward and Jeffrey Simmons. The Titans believe that Ward and Simmons are pillars of the organization, and they want to build around them. Now, at the end of the day, I think we can agree you can't trade Cam Ward because you just drafted him number 1 overall. Now, I would have traded Cam Ward before I drafted him, and I would have signed Sam Darnold, and I know you all know that, so I don't need to go there. But I think it's a given that we all knew they weren't going to trade Cam Ward, so that's not really much of a headline. But the story is Simmons. And I don't know if this is true or not, but the insiders were saying teams have been calling about Jeffrey Simmons, and the Titans have been saying no and hanging up the phone. I do not understand how they plan to build this football team up if they don't trade Jeffrey Simmons. And I know there are a lot of Titan fans out there that don't want to trade Jeffrey Simmons either. And I get it. Like, I understand where you're coming from. Simmons is the best player on this team. The defense is totally lifeless without Jeffrey Simmons on it. He is the only pass rusher worth a shit that they have, even though he's a defensive tackle. And this year, Simmons has actually played up to his status, and I think he's done a good job of kind of saying the right things. People say, like, Jared, you hate Simmons. It's personal with Simmons. No, it's not. It's the way you play. And I am giving Simmons all the credit in the world because I think Simmons has played his ass off this year for this terrible organization and this terrible team. And I got no problem admitting that. But I'm trying to figure out, if you don't trade Jeffrey Simmons, how are you going to get better? And I understand that you're not a better team tomorrow or next season if you trade Jeffrey Simmons. I would agree. You're not a better team. And I hate that because you're already bad. But the truth is, even with Jeffrey Simmons on your team, you lost to this Indianapolis team by 3 touchdowns. You know what the difference between in the scores against Indianapolis with Jeffrey Simmons and without Jeffrey Simmons? And I do think Jeffrey Simmons played a great game the first time they played Indy. They lost 41-20. This time, they lost 38-24. The difference was 3 points. That's it. So you've got Jeffrey Simmons on your team. You lose to Indy by 21. Jeffrey Simmons doesn't play. You lose to Indy by 24. And Jeffrey Simmons is 28, which means he'll be 29 next year and 30 the year after that. So he's going to be close to out of his prime soon enough. You're not going to be good while he's 29 or 30. So it makes no sense to me for them to not trade Jeffrey Simmons because, once again, you have no shot of being good while he's on your team. And I would love for this team to say, you know what? We're going to really invest. We're going to go all in. We're going to really rebuild this thing from the ground up. Well, that starts by trading Simmons. And I would love to believe that the Titans are smart enough to understand this, that Simmons is the only piece of property on their team. I mean, I'm trying to think, like, is there anybody else when it comes to this team that is worth anything to anybody else? Or like worth anything to me that is a value piece in a rebuild? You know, again, I use Ryan Tannehill as the example. Ryan Tannehill ended up being a really good Titan, and they got him for a 4th-round pick. But outside of that, what did they get? What did they get when drafting later over the years? David Long, very good. But it's not like they got Derrick Henry drafting late. It's not like they got Jack Conklin drafting late. I mean, you look at the rest of the assets they have, like Cody Barton, he sucks. Chigakonkwo? Okay, so Chigakonkwo will get you a 6th. Yay! That'll rebuild the team. Again, if you're going to rebuild the team, you have to trade the players that people want. I used to say this all the time. I would say with the Predators, they need to trade Johansson and Duchesne. And I kept saying, nobody wants the players that you don't want because they don't want them for the same reasons. When it comes to rebuilding the team, you need first-round picks, you need second-round picks. Maybe I'll take some third-round picks. But not – so the only guy that's going to get first-round pick is Simmons. He's the most valuable asset that they have. I actually think, and this is how bad Cam Ward has been, that if you were to say to the league, hey, everybody's available, and you were even Ward, I think there's a chance Simmons would get you the biggest return. And again, you're not good with him now, and there's almost no way that you're going to be good next year, and there's almost no way you're going to be good the year after that unless you hit on a bunch of picks, and you need Simmons to get you the picks. So I have to ask. Again, that was very long-winded of me saying that, look, I don't think it's a sign of negativity on Simmons that I think they should trade him. I think it's just the reality of where they are. So if you're not going to trade Simmons, where are you getting the picks to rebuild the team? Because once again, you don't have extra first-round picks in next year's draft or extra second-round picks in next year's draft because you chose to draft Cam Ward. Okay. But at some point, you're going to have to build a roster around Cam Ward for you to be successful. He's going to need receivers. He's going to need tight ends. He's going to need an offensive line. He's going to need a defense. He's going to need pass rushers. Like, he's going to need players around him to be successful. Everybody knows that. But if you don't have any extra picks, then you have to either absolutely nail every single pick you make, or you have to manufacture more picks. And by not trading the Cam Ward pick last year, you limited yourself from a big picture standpoint from manufacturing the draft capital to build yourself a team. So if you're not going to trade Simmons, it's one thing. I looked at it and I said, you need to sign a quarterback because I know that this team still probably be kind of lousy if a decent quarterback was on it. Like if you put Daniel Jones on this team with Callahan as the coach, they'd still stink because Callahan is a numbskull. But they would be better than they are right now with Daniel Jones as the quarterback. But if you put Daniel Jones on this quarterback, on this team, with an extra first-round pick and an extra second-round pick, better player, if you were able to do that, then you would have a better roster than what you have today. Might have an extra pass rusher, might have an extra receiver, might have all those things. But once you decide to take Cam Ward, you've decided, okay, we're not going that route to manufacture picks. Which, if the prospect at the top of the board had been Caleb Williams, or had been Drake May, or had been Trevor Lawrence, or had been Joe Burrow, or had been that caliber of prospect, I would have said you take the quarterback. So, but Cam was not that. They convinced themselves he was, but they were convinced that Cam was that kind of player. So once you But I don't think that does you any good. I don't think that does you any good because you don't know what pick you're going to have. So, big picture, I just do not understand, cannot understand how they plan on building the club if they won't trade Simmons. Like, I don't get it. If they won't trade Simmons, where are you getting all the draft picks to build this team, to draft, develop, and retain? So I think this is an organization that is completely lost. And I would say that if they had shown some proof of concept that they had a clue as to what they're doing, that I could say, you know what, they're probably playing the system here. They know. They don't. They're not. Okay, let's get to some of your reaction here today on the program. Dixie says prime Tom Brady would be 1-7 on this team. First of all, prime Tom Brady would not be 1-7, but that's a different discussion because you can't get prime Tom Brady. Kyle says they should forfeit the rest of the season. They are genuinely the worst team in NFL history. So Drew Diener, who I used to work with in Louisville, Drew Diener sent me a text today in which he said that the Titans are the worst team in NFL history. And Drew Diener does the morning show in Louisville. I used to work with him years ago. And he said they're the worst team in NFL history. And I'm like, I went into this year thinking this team was going to be bad. I didn't think that they were going to be worse than the 14 and 15 teams, and they might be. This team has one guy, Amani DiMarcado, the third string running back for the Arizona Cardinals, away from being 0-17. Because I do not see a win on this schedule this year. Every game is the same. Whether it is the Colts who are good, the Rams who are contenders, or the Raiders. Every game is the same. And this season is so... I don't even know who they play next week. Who do they play next week? I don't even know. Gamer says, Denard needs to be fired along with everyone else. Agreed. I am not impressed with Denard Wilson. I'm trying to figure out why everybody thinks he's so good. Like, everybody was like, Denard, everybody wanted him with the Ravens. And I'm like, why? Did they? Like, all those Raven coaches, they're not very good. The guy they have now, Zach Orr, he stinks. He was on that staff. Anthony Weaver, the defensive coordinator of Miami, he stinks. I think Denard stinks. Sorry. People probably don't want to hear that. People probably want to hear, oh, Denard, he's the best. Let Denard cook. But Denard stinks. But, I mean, I'm firing all the coaches. I mean, there's like this college QB coach that Cam Ward's friends with that people are like, the Titans need to hire him as the quarterback's coach. I'm like, let's hire the head coach first. And then let's hope that the head coach is not a moron like the last head coach. And let's let the next head coach pick his coaching staff instead of deciding that Cam Ward's buddies should be on the coaching staff. But knowing Amy, she'll probably listen to Twitter and they'll probably make Cam Ward's buddies the coaches. Because again, that's what Amy would do. Listen to Twitter. CW says Cam is a one-trick pony. He can't read NFL coverages from the pocket, so he can just scramble and then make reads. And then once defenses learn to just contain the edges, he will be even worse. So I don't think Cam is a one-trick pony. I am also trying to figure out if Cam is a one-trick pony, what is the one trick that Cam is exceptional at. But there was one play that bothered me early in the game. It was a third down, and Miami brought the Miami brought the corner on a blitz. And I think it was a 3rd and 6, and he gets right to Cam and boom, pops him and sacks him right then and there. Now, Daniel Jones had something similar on a play where McCreary got him. And so maybe this is just the NFL. But when I watched Cam's tape, specifically the early portions of the Cal game last year, I kept noticing a quarterback who either didn't recognize the blitz or didn't care to recognize the blitz. Miami would have 5 guys in a protect. The other team would be showing 6 or 7 blitzing. And instead of, checking the protection, and instead of bringing a back in, like, hey, you got him, instead of the things we see a lot of these quarterbacks do, Cam would just sit there, clap his hands, look over to the sidelines, clap his hands again. And they would bring like 7 guys. So Miami would have 5 guys to block 7. They'd bring 7, and Cam would just try to wiggle away from those guys and try to make throws. And I'm like, that will not work in the NFL. Like, it may work against Cal in the ACC, but that will not work in the NFL. So on that 3rd down and 6, Indy's showing a blitz with a corner, right there off the slot. Cam's sitting there. Takes the snap, guy comes, there's nobody in to protect. There was no adjustment ahead of time. There was no hot read, hey, he's coming, boom, ball out. There was none of that. That's on Cam. Again, this is the NFL, and it's the quarterback is the last guy to be able to make that kind of decision before he snaps the ball into that kind of snap. Like he's the last guy to make that kind of decision. People are telling me that we're getting spammed constantly. I don't know how to, I don't know how do I do that? How do I control the spam on the YouTube chat? How do you do that? That is for somebody who knows more about this than me. Okay. So I saw Kaharski criticize this on Twitter. This was down 38-7. What the fuck are we running on first down? So Jason McCourty explained this on the TV broadcast, that even though the Titans were down by a bunch of points in the middle of the third quarter, they were running the ball and they were going with a huddle. And Jason McCourty explained it, that Mike McCoy said, hey, even though it doesn't make a lot of sense, that our focus is to develop Cam Ward. So we're going to treat these as essentially practice reps for Cam Ward. So we're worried about Cam getting in game-like reps instead of being worried about Cam trying to win the game. And in general, I'm fine with that. But I have never heard a head coach, because this is what it sounds like they did. I have never heard a head coach this is me. I've never heard a head coach tell the media, hey, or the TV broadcasters, hey, when we get our asses kicked today, this is what we're going to do. Now, maybe it happens when Scarbini State takes on Alabama, and so they want to give them just like a little sense of, hey, when we are getting our asses kicked, we're going to put, Jonas Judson in, and, his mother just beat cancer. And so, when we put Jonas in there, when we're down by 40, it'd be nice on the TV broadcast if you guys shouted out his mom and said that she just beat cancer. But again, that's when Nowhere State plays Alabama. That is not an NFL game. I've never heard of an NFL coach telling the broadcasters, hey, when we're running the ball down by 30, it's because we're trying to develop the quarterback. So here's our strategy for when we're getting our ass beat, which does make sense since apparently they get their ass beat the exact same way every single game, the exact same fashion. And they're always down by a bunch at the end. So I will give you that. One person says, I need a time machine to fast forward past the Cam Ward era. Hopeless. Again, I just want, all I want, and I know they'll never do it, and this is total arrogance out of me. Or I don't know if it's arrogance. I don't know if it's, I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. Arrogance. Attention seeking. I don't know what it is. Narcissism. I don't know. I just want the Cam over Sam crew to admit that I actually had a point this offseason about Sam Darnold. That Kevin O'Connell isn't the coaching god who made this team so much better. Like that, oh my God, Sam really sucks, and Kevin O'Connell's a genius, and Kevin O'Connell is the reason. And no, Sam's good. And you could have had Sam, and then you could have traded the picks, and then you could have built your team with stability at quarterback with a guy who's actually good. And instead, you haven't. And I want people to be open to the I'm being a bust, if for no other reason than this organization is terrible. William says, what's crazy is how Levis got chance after chance, but Ward won't even get a full season, and you all are out on him. I mean, Levis got benched like 9 games into last year. So I wouldn't say he got a full season. Cam's going to get a full season, and Cam will be the starting quarterback next year. And about this time next year, if the results are the same, and because I don't trust the decision-making of the Titans, I assume that they probably will be. If the results are the same a year from now, then you'll start to hear about next season. We'll bring in some competition for Cam. And so Cam will definitely get a longer leash than Levis. Cam was the number 1 pick. And that's the only reason that he'll get a longer leash than Levis, is because he was the number 1 pick. But to think that like Levis got it better than Cam, that's ridiculous. Give me a break. Levis did not get it better than Cam. So is this true? Brian Kelly got fired? I actually said in Six Pack Picks when it came to Brian Kelly, and, maybe I'll have a Brian Kelly take here in a second. Apparently so. Pete Nako's reporting it from On3. I'll have a Brian Kelly take here at the end of the program. We'll continue along with your reaction, and I'll throw my Brian Kelly take out there. Might have more on Brian Kelly tomorrow if we have a show. David says, Simmons is out of character for a new team. I think Simmons definitely decided to lose the weight to become more of a pass rusher, more of a disruptive force, and he's been a very good leader, character guy this year because the real guaranteed money on his contract runs out after this year, and the Titans can get out of it. And so you got it. Now he's kind of year to year. I think Simmons, and I don't know this, but I think Simmons wants his options open. He hired Todd France to be his agent this offseason. He got rid of the buddy as his agent and went out and got a real big-time agent in Todd France. And I think Todd France has probably told him, Jeffrey, if you want another big payday in your career, you need to shut up. You need to go get stats. You need to go hit the quarterback. You need to go be a force. You need to go be great. And you need to be a good citizen. And he's done that. To his credit, I'm not going to knock him for that. Hey, if this is what's motivating, I don't know exactly what's motivating. I think that's probably true. Maybe it's the idea of, hey, I want teams to think that I'm a great player and that I'm not a malcontent. So let me mind my P's and Q's and let me play my butt off. And then let me go to the Titans at the end of the year and demand a trade. What? I don't know. But I do think that I don't think Simmons' motivation, and I actually say this in a non-negative way. This is not a knock on Simmons' character. I don't think Simmons' motivation this season has been about, hey, I am going to get in better shape and I'm going to disrupt these games and I am going to, say all the right stuff and because I want the Titans to be good. I think it's because Simmons is looking out for himself. But you know what? There's only one person in the world who can look out for you, and it's you. So I don't have a problem with that. And the way I always look at it is, what's the best thing for Jeffrey Simmons? Play great. Your team will want you. Your team will probably play better, although apparently not much better. Your team will want you. Other teams will want you. The price goes up. Pouting or not caring doesn't really get you anywhere. Nobody wants L'Jarius Sneed. So for whatever reason, I think Simmons has done a solid job. David says, trading Byard has gotten them released players. Jarvis Brownlee and Jaquan Jackson for the Rand Carthon fleeced Howie Roseman. Unbelievable. Okay. So, I do want to get my thoughts in on the Brian Kelly front at LSU. This is what I'm going to say about Florida, Penn State, and LSU. Is their jobs where they're paying their coaches a lot of money in order to not coach. And it's unfortunate, but it is a reality in college sports. For some reason, we anoint coaches before they have proven themselves to be Urban Meyer or Nick Saban or Mike Krzyzewski to be Mike Krzyzewski, Billy Donovan, Nick Saban, Urban Meyer. We seem to always do that. These schools are so desperate for our guy to lead us to the promised land that what they do is when they don't get it, they give a guy a huge contract and this guy's going to lead us to the promised land. And when he doesn't do it, they get upset. Brian Kelly never led Notre Dame to the promised land. He got them to a national championship game in which Alabama beat the ever-living crap out of them. That's the one thing he did. But LSU gave him a contract and gave him the resources as if he had won 4 national titles at Notre Dame. He didn't. So when he goes to LSU and he does the exact same thing he does at Notre Dame, people get mad. But why would you expect him to do anything different than what he's done at Notre Dame. And James Franklin, they paid him at State like a national championship coach. But James Franklin had already demonstrated he couldn't beat the big dogs. Ohio State, Michigan when they're good. He can't. But they paid him like a champion. Indiana has paid their coach like a national championship caliber coach. Well, he hasn't won a national title yet. It looks good at Indiana, but he hasn't won a national title. Billy Napier was a swing and a miss at a mid-major coach. That's going to happen. You know, you may find Urban Meyer out of the mid-major. You may find Billy Napier out of the mid-major. That's going to happen. That doesn't bother me. Just, you know, reshuffle the deck and go try to find a next coach. But I don't know who these schools are going to hire because everybody keeps talking about Lane Kiffin. And I keep thinking to myself, Lane Kiffin would be an idiot to take Florida or LSU when he's losing to teams like Kentucky last year at Ole Miss and thinking like, yeah, I'm going to go to Florida and not have the exact same results I had at Ole Miss, but the results at Ole Miss are going to get me fired at LSU or Florida. So what Lane Kiffin's going to do is he's going to turn that into a pay raise at Ole Miss. He'll start making $11 million at Ole Miss. He's smart enough to do that. I heard Nick Saban, and, you know, Nick Saban is driving me crazy on College Game Day. Last year, I thought Saban was great. Saban this year has turned into a total apologist when it comes to these coaches. He sits there and he says, when it comes to my team, what we're trying to do, it's unfair the way that we treat these coaches, and it's NIL's fault and all that kind of stuff. Saban made a comment on Game Day when they were talking about the next Florida coach. He brought up Clark Lee's name. And I've said this. If Clark Lee were to leave Vanderbilt to take a big job, he would be an idiot because Vanderbilt stuck by him when he won 2 games in year 3. You can't do that at Florida. You can't do that at LSU. LSU did not stick with Ed Orgeron when they were losing 2 years after winning a national championship. The truth is, Clark, and I know that Vanderbilt's good and I'm excited about it, and we don't know if this is sustainable for Vanderbilt beyond Diego Pavia. I hope it is, but we don't know that. If I'm Clark, I go to Vandy and say, let's sign a contract extension. Let's get me a little bit of a pay raise, but I'm not going to ask for LSU money. I'm not going to ask for Penn State money, but let's get a little bit of a raise in here. But I'm staying here forever because you guys stood by me, Candace Lee, when I was 2-10 in my 3rd year. So I wouldn't take those jobs. Now, if you're a coach with a huge ego who wants to prove that you're Nick Saban or wants to prove that you're Urban Meyer and you're willing to deal with the heat and you're willing to be fired and you're willing, fine. But if you're a coach with a job where they respect you and where you're making a bunch of money and maybe you can make a little bit more, but your fan base and your bosses and your boosters, and they understand like, hey, we're not going to win every game. Stay there. If you're somewhere where you can go 8-4 and not be miserable, stay there. If you're at some place like Lane Kiffin where you can lose to Kentucky or lose to a bad Florida team last year, stay there. You can't do that at Georgia. So don't go. And the other thing I'll say, I find it so arrogant that these schools like Penn State and Florida, and they're like, oh, we're not going to hire. We're not going to hire coordinators. We're better than that. Really? Kirby Smart was a coordinator. You better than that? So I don't know who LSU is going to hire. I'm sure the lists will all come out. I'm sure it's all the same people they're talking about for Florida. Lane Kiffin and Jeff Brom. And I'm sure it's the same people. Again, if I were those guys, I wouldn't be interested in those jobs. But I'll give LSU credit because LSU is the New York Yankees of college sports. They got the money. and they'll pay, and they'll treat you like a king. And there is nothing you've got to ask for. But if you don't win, get the fuck out. We don't care what kind of guy you are. We don't care what your past is. We don't care. But if you don't win, get the hell out. So, big picture, I'm not surprised LSU got fired. I said in six-pack picks, and I picked A&M to win in a blowout. I said six-pack picks that LSU Brian Kelly era was there was going to be a statement about that in the LSU A&M game, and it was either going to be like LSU, here's all the negativity, and they push back and they win a game at night in Death Valley, and hey, we got our coaches back, or we're going to quit. And I assumed that it was going to be we're going to quit, and they did quit. And so I'm not surprised he got fired. I mean, man, talk about an underwhelming tenure. I mean, for Brian Kelly, given the fact that they paid him all that money, and Notre Dame has gotten better since, or at least the same, since Brian Kelly left. So I don't know who's going to take that job, but if I see, like Joey says, Florida is better than that. We deserve Marcus Freeman or better. Marcus Freeman, it would be an idiot to leave Notre Dame. He started off 0-2. I mean, he starts off 0-2 at Florida and fire him. He'd be an idiot to leave. If Brian Kelly was at Notre Dame, he'd still be the coach. He'd be an idiot to leave. Why would you leave Notre Dame? Crazy. Josh says, thoughts on Vandy. I thought Vandy played sloppy last night, and they won. And if they can win at Texas, where I don't think they'll be favored, they're going to beat Kentucky, they're going to beat Auburn. If they can win at Texas, and I don't know if they can or not, if they can win at Texas, they're going to playoff. A 10-win SEC team makes it the end. So even if they lose to UT at the end of the year, which I think they will, but I'm not as convinced as I was that they would lose to UT, I think that they're going to make it to the playoff if they beat Texas. And I think they should beat Texas. And how about that Sark stuff? So again, post-game live, because the Titans are so bad, post-game live is kind of morphed into a reaction to the Brian Kelly firing. Again, as there's just a little breaking news out there. But that's going to do it for us. Thank you to Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Again, Stillman & Company, 2 o'clock every Monday through Friday. Like and subscribe. Be sure to hit that like. It's free. Hit it. Hit the like and subscribe, and we will see everybody here on the program, I assume tomorrow, at 2 o'clock here on Stillman & Company.